Hi, I'm Jan James from Parental Alienation UK, which is part of Good Egg Safety CIC. And I feel compelled to speak out at this time in this space because the reason we've developed Parental Alienation UK is that it's the biggest scandal I have ever come across. The biggest, and I've worked on many, where our children are being taught to hate, to reject, to dismiss, to ignore court orders, to disregard and disrespect a safe, loving parent. And then we question why 1 in 8 children now have at least one mental health disorder. And on the current trajectory will likely be 20% of our population in the next 2 decades. And the domestic abuse bill is now in the House of Lords. And we had one lone voice, Philip Davies, in the House of Commons, much derided, a bit like Alienation itself, and probably 1 or 2 lone voices in the House of Lords, because there's a whole conspiracy of silence, because either it's not politically or professionally expedient to stick your head up above the parapet, but somebody has to do it, because we're not looking at truth. We're not seeing the truth. Truth 1, not all victims of domestic abuse are women. And I say that as a survivor of life-threatening abuse. I'm married at 17, I was almost dead by 18. You don't forget that. But I'm not a victim. I've moved on, and my life is probably richer for it, particularly since I got a beautiful child from it, who's the light of my life. Secondly, the thought that the disregarding of 800, almost 800,000 male victims, which is the equivalent of Wembley Stadium, full to capacity, full of male victims who are suffering the same kinds of extreme as women victims, disregarded. ×9 Wembley Stadium, disregarded. And the reason that's so important is that the children of those male victims are being ignored because they're male victims, so it's fine. It's not fine. It will never be fine that we don't protect 100% of our children. And therefore, the domestic abuse bill needs to cover all victims, including those who are suffering from the much maligned and distorted parental alienation of abusive behaviours, where psychological abuse and coercive control is at its heart. I defy anyone to tell me, and please feel free to do so, if you think that taking a child or children from a loving, safe parent, because that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about estrangement. We're talking about safe, loving parents who've had the attachment bond with their child ruptured, that isn't abusive. And think about this. If you have children yourself, how you might feel, because we need a bit of empathy here, that you might drop your children off at school one day and actually never see them again for years because your ex-partner, who could be a husband or a wife, because this is not a gender issue, no matter how many times we hear it, decides that actually you're superfluous to requirements. Maybe you had an affair, or maybe you didn't pay enough, or maybe you fed the kids beans. Whatever the excuse, that suddenly you don't see your children anymore. And you go to our great British UK courts, our family courts, expecting justice. You'll pay a $215 for the C100 form to do the application. Obsessive alienators will breach it with impunity. You'll pay a $215 for the C79 enforcement, and less than 1% will be enforced. You could go back to court for years and years, and meanwhile your child's emotional health and stability is eroding fast. There is no great British justice unless the domestic abuse bill includes the behaviours of parental alienation. And I say this now, I don't care if it's not called parental alienation. It's just a handy term that is used in the courts and is recognised by CAFCAS. But it doesn't matter what it's called. What it is unacceptable. It's destroying lives and it's destroying children's lives. And on our watch, we cannot see this, hear this, and remain silent. Our children are suffering, so someone needs to stand up, and not just the lone voices. And if you're a parent and you have lost your child through alienation, just know that we will do whatever we can to raise visibility, to make this public and shine a very bright light on an issue that's hidden in plain sight. I promise you that. We will not stop until this particular festering boil is burst and our children, all of our children, and victim parents are protected. Thank you for listening.